pod bay doors, please, Hal.
What we have in mind is breakfast in bed for 400,000. Now, it's not going to be steak and eggs or anything, but it's going to be good food, and we're going to get it to you. It's not just the hog farm either. It's like the Ojai Mountain family and the pranksters and everybody else that has volunteered and put in their time into the free kitchens. In fact, it's everybody. We're all feeding each other. We must be in heaven, man. There is always a little bit of heaven in a disaster area.
The pod bay doors are open. Welcome once again. I'm your host, Jerry Dean Roberts of ArmchairCinema.com and also ArmchairOscars.com. And seated across from me is my groovy co-host, the critic, historian, and legend for TalkMovieMe.com, the one and only Mr. Doug Heller. How the heck are you today, sir?
We've gotten some reports of some brown bad acid. Try to stay away from the brown acid. It's your trip, man, but it's bad acid. Don't use it.
Brown acid that just sounds terrible. I guess it's better than red acid.
It's the clear acid you got to worry about.
Really?
I don't know. I've never used it.
I'm too buttoned down even.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Welcome to our tribute to the 50th anniversary of the Woodstock Festival.
Far out, man.
August 15th, 16th, and 17th of 1969 was a defining moment of the youth culture. And really the end of the hippie period.
Yeah, I was going to say it's the last gasp of the hippie period because this after this there weren't a lot of places to go.
Yeah, this is their pinnacle, and because the 70s were basically a hangover.
Yeah.
And the best thing about this is that this and the moon landing at least allowed a very unhappy decade to come to a positive conclusion.
Right.
Coming off of a year that saw the murders of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King.
And Bobby Kennedy's wasn't that far before this.
It was a year before. It was in June of 68.
68.
And then elected the worst possible president we could have had in that unhappy period. The first election of Richard Nixon.
Still,
it's
better than where we are now.
Somebody said something. Yeah, well, somebody said something. At least Nixon was a politician.
Yeah.
Somebody said something really interesting that I heard the other day. There were just as many kids at Woodstock as there were in Vietnam at the time.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting statistic.
Oh yeah. It didn't they keep saying in the movie that it was like the third largest city in the country?
For 3 days, yeah.
Yeah.
For the third largest city in New York.
For 3 days.
For 3 days.
That's still pretty big.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about the event, but also about Michael Wadley's film from 1970, which won the Oscar, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Edited by a young Thelma Schoonmaker and a young Martin Scorsese. Was one of her assistants.
She would go on to edit. She would go on to work with him on all of his films.
From Raging Bull on.
Right. Up to the current moment.
Yeah.
Was it
Irishman?
Yeah. Up to The Irishman, yeah. And that's a partnership that's lasted for 50 years.
Right. He actually introduced her to her husband, who was Michael Powell of Powell and Pressburger.
Right. The Archers.
Right. He was a lot older than her, but they got married, and when he died, I don't know that she ever really remarried. I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
But
It's a remarkable film,
oh yeah,
and the only way to really appreciate this film is to really understand how it could have been done in other hands. The thing now, I watched this. I watched the 4-hour version of
yeah,
this,
me too.
which is not the version that anybody saw in theaters, because there are a lot of things in the film that were not in. For example, a lot of Janis Joplin stuff. A
Crosby,
lot of
Stills, and Nash.
Crosby, Stills, and Nash. A lot of the performances in
Which
the extended cut that I've seen were allowed to go on
right, yeah.
for a while.
I always thought it was funny. Neil Young was actually with Crosby, Stills, and Nash
Mm.
at Woodstock. That was the first. Stephen Stills didn't know how they were going to reproduce a lot of the stuff that he had just done in the studio.
Mhm.
And this was their first live gig, so he asked Neil Young to come in and help him out. And Neil Young refused to be filmed.
Mhm.
So that's why just to the right of David Crosby is this big old dark space.
Mhm.
Because they shut off the lights. You can hear him.
Yeah.
But there's one outtake, I think, that they introduced. Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Young.
Mhm.
And,
This was before they became Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young.
right, well, this was the beginning of that. But they, he basically, like, worked himself out of being in the film.
Right. Which
'Cause
is tragic.
He thought it would be too distracting to his performance.
Just
He's
tragic.
Yeah, he's since gone on to release something like 15 concert films.
Yeah. Not good ones.
The straight up concert ones are pretty good. The
They did one called Year of the Horse, which was
that Jim
terrible.
Jarmusch really overdid that one. But things like Silver and Gold that are just straight up concert movies without a story over top of them, they're
Mhm.
pretty good. Also, the 2 Jonathan Demme documentaries that he did on Young.
Right. Right.
But anyway.
But anyway,
I could talk concert
we've
films
actually
for
featured a
days.
Neil Young song on this show.
Mhm.
At the end of our Lost Weekend episode, was it Out on the Weekend?
Yeah.
Which you introduced me to that song,
Hmm.
and I absolutely love it. I do.
I've introduced you to, I think, a lot of songs on
Yeah.
the ends of our episodes.
If I don't pick them,
Yeah.
we always try to put a song at the end of the show that's like fitting or ironic to the movie that we're doing. Anyway, we should talk about. I've done a lot of research. I was looking at where exactly this concert came from, and it's really fascinating because it was basically two straight up sort of
Button
preppy
down Wall
guys
Street types, yeah.
and two hippies
Mm-hmm.
essentially, and it was essentially it was John Roberts and Joel Rosenman, who John Roberts, heir to the Polydent fortune,
Yeah.
and Joel Rosenman, who had just gotten out of law school, met up with Michael Lang and Artie Kornfeld, who were it was Madison Avenue meets Haight-Ashbury, and that's what made this work. That's what made it come together. And but it was really trying to. They wanted to open a recording studio, and they needed the money to do that. That's where this idea came from. And I love John Roberts said he went to his investor. He went to his investor, and the guy had an aquarium with piranha in it. Just to let you know, if you take out, if you try to screw him, he's gonna
You might lose a finger or two.
Right, right. You might become fish food.
Right.
But I can't imagine. And it was really his fortune that got this thing off the ground because they were trying to get that's how they got all these acts because they promised all of this money from his trust fund because he was going to get $1 million at 25, another million at 30, and another million at 35.
Yeah.
So I mean, he was making money. He was going to live comfortably. So and a lot
Aging
of
gracefully into wealth.
right, pretty much. And when they put this thing together, and I love this story. I love this. The original location for this was in Wallkill, New York. Having a Woodstock concert in Wallkill, New York is like trying to have it in the middle of Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah.
Okay. The community, and I've seen the photographs, it's fascinating because think of the people who live there. Because the space that they had in Wallkill was appropriate. It's actually more appropriate than what they had because it had it had electricity, it had water, it was just perfect. But the local community had signed off on this, thinking concert, symphony. They thought folk music. They thought, they had it. But then they started hearing from their kids.
Newport Junior, but no.
Yeah, they started hearing from their kids about what was coming in, and they started to get nervous. Now, if you've seen the photographs of the residents of this place at the time, it was basically beer and cigarettes. It was basically beer and my gun and football on Sunday. That's the people that
Yeah, yeah. But I did
far
love,
right wingers.
I did very much love when they did actually talk to the people. Most of it, some of it was just closed-minded. They're all high on reefer. But
they're gonna dump acid on our water and rape our daughters.
right, yeah. But then there was I love the one guy. He's like, they've been perfect. We've been helping them out. They've been amazing. They've been great. And he goes, oh, well, you should tell the police. He goes, I'm the chief of police.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hello.
And
well, I guess they're fine then.
yeah, because they're okay then. So they pulled the permit, so they had to move it 31 days before the concert was supposed to start. And so they had to move it. They got a break from a guy named Max Yasger, who offered them his farm, but he added a zero to what they were asking. They were asking for 17. They're going to pay 1,700. He put a zero on it, and he also had him in a corner because they had nowhere else to go. And this place had no water. It had no electricity, and it had one main road getting into town.
Yeah. Although, just think about it this way. For everything that went wrong with this, can you imagine us sitting here talking about the 50th anniversary of the Wallkill Music Festival?
Yeah. Well, actually, what I was thinking is, if you know the good fortune that happened with this concert, then you know that basically we're lucky we're not sitting here talking about the Wallkill massacre.
Yeah.
Because almost everything that happened with this thing was good fortune.
Oh yeah, yeah. This was all. It's remarkable how poorly this could have gone and didn't.
There were 2 deaths that weekend. One guy died of a heroin overdose, and another one got backed over by a tractor in a sleeping bag, and that's it. And I mean, it's tragic that happened, but I mean, it could have been worse. There was a moment when the governor had called John Roberts and said, "You know what? I'm thinking about sending troops down there." And they all started panicking because Nelson Rockefeller was going to send in troops just to make you know. And I was like, okay,
And
and
I think this worked because a lot of the attendees,
mm,
um, and one of them actually said this, but they didn't want this to be another Altamont,
right, right,
which is the famous Rolling Stones concert where they got the Hell's Angels to do security.
and they were
Brilliantly
all high.
documented, yeah, brilliantly documented by the Maysles brothers in the
Mm.
documentary "Gimme Shelter," which I would love to talk about someday.
Yeah, and the Hells Angels were high and they were drinking and they got violent and they killed somebody,
Yeah, stabbed them, you know, right
stabbed them.
there on, and it's in the film,
Mm.
which is gruesome.
Yeah, and the Stones are high
Hmm.
and they're just trying to keep playing and it was just a it's horrible. This is it's funny. We think of 50 years later, we think of Woodstock as peace, love, you know, peace, love, dope,
3 days of
acid,
peace, love, and music.
and it falls in the middle of all of this terrible
Hmm.
violence. We're in a war that we can't get out of. We're in, you know, this is the after the grim legacy of Altamont
Hmm.
and what happened in Chicago a year
Hmm.
earlier, which we talked about last year.
Hmm.
We're in the middle of, again, year after two assassinations.
Hmm.
You know, Malcolm X had been assassinated, JFK had been assassinated, Bobby Kennedy had been assassinated. It just,
MLK.
it, yeah, this happens in the middle of all of that
Hmm.
and threatens to be another statistic.
Right.
And it wasn't. Everything
No.
that could have gone wrong and didn't.
Yeah. And you know everything that did go wrong, they got out of.
Right,
You
right.
know they got water and food flown in. They
Mm-hmm.
had medical tents and freak out tents.
The hog farm.
The dog park.
The hog farm, this hippie colony, I think run by Wavy Gravy,
I think so.
who this was unconventional, but they knew what they were doing. They would set up these tents so that they could go and anybody who was having a bad trip, they knew how to handle it.
Hmm.
You know, they weren't just pumping them full of morphine. They weren't, you know, anything like that. They just took them in. You know, the guy,
They
I
talked him
think,
down.
yeah, they talked him down. He said the first guy walks in and he says, "My name is Joyce." You know, and he says, "You know, what is your name?" He says, "Bob." He says, "Your name is Bob." He's like, "My name is Bob." You know, and they would talk him down. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
but they again they knew how to handle it.
Because they'd been there.
Because they've been there. They were hippie They were
Yeah,
hippie commune. They knew what to
yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Wavy
But
Gravy is still famous today.
yeah, yeah, and still living, by the
Yeah,
way.
yeah. I was gonna say I'm pretty sure he hasn't gone yet.
Um, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But if you the thing is, and I was really surprised by this when I saw the movie. The list of talent.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's not just a list of talent. This is the defining music scene of the 1960s.
Yeah, it's
Everybody was
funny.
there with the Beatles. I mean,
Yeah, and Bob Dylan.
and Bob Dylan.
He had left a little bit earlier. He had taken up residence in Woodstock
Mhm.
in late '66 or early '67 to recuperate from a quote unquote motorcycle accident.
Yeah.
Um, and he met up with his backup band, which
Mhm.
became the band,
Mhm.
at a pink rental house that they called Big Pink, and
Yeah.
they recorded the basement tapes up there, and the band's first record, music
Mhm.
from Big Pink, which is why it's called that. Uh, they were at the festival too, but they got cut from the movie. There's bonus features with their performance, and
Yeah.
more Joplin stuff. But this is the height of everything really that was 60s music,
Right.
except Bob Dylan and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
The Beatles were invited, but Lennon had declined.
Right.
They were coming apart at that point, and they
Oh,
were a
they
year
were.
from.
Yeah.
They were a year from. But how would it have been if they had?
That would have been amazing.
It would have been amazing. But one of the great things about the movie, and they do this trick that I'm sort of, I like this for this film, but I'm not crazy about the technique. They do a lot of split screen,
Right. To fill out this like super huge wide screen. Um,
which is really why you could never watch this on VHS, because it had to be crunched in, and you couldn't
yeah.
see. You could see a person speaking. The great thing about this is you can see a person speaking, and right next to them is the image of what they're talking about.
Right.
Because someone's talking about how many people are, why are there not more people here? Well, it's because they're out on the road.
Mm-hmm.
There are a million people on this 2-lane road trying to get there. And you see these cars just backed up and backed up and backed up and backed up of everybody trying to get into this small town.
Mm-hmm.
And on video, you just see the person saying that.
Yeah.
You don't see the actual
Yeah.
road.
I've fortunately only ever seen this in widescreen,
Mhm.
so I think I've only ever seen the director's cut.
Yeah. I saw the theatrical version in a widescreen format in the early 90s.
Hmm.
And I then, the one I watched was the same one that you watched.
Yeah.
And it's a remarkable film for a lot of reasons. One major reason is you don't feel like a passive observer.
No, you really do feel like you're there.
You do. They give you an immersive. He gives you an immersive experience. Because most of the time when you have these concert films, the talent is there, and you're here, and that's all you're focused on.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of editing. A lot of the acts are cut. A lot of the things, but no, this, you really do feel like you're kind of all over the place. One of my favorites, and one of the most famous, is the first act that they brought up, and that was Richie Havens.
Richie Havens.
Richie Havens, you're sitting on stage next to him,
Yeah.
and
He only recently died too.
yeah, he died in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
I saw him in an airport once.
Really?
He had this long gray beard.
Mm-hmm.
He had a guitar with him, and he was the first act. They brought him up. He was only supposed to play 20 minutes,
Right.
and he kept going off.
Because
He kept going
they needed him to stretch, and he just kept going.
because they were flying the other acts in by helicopter
Right.
to get over the traffic, and everybody else that they called in, like Arlo Guthrie,
Mm-hmm.
was supposed to play on the second day, but Arlo Guthrie was as high as a kite.
He was gone. Listening to him talk, I can only imagine what his father would have felt.
Oh my God.
Because, like, he's just standing out there. Yeah, man, like, they closed the throughway, man. It's, like, totally groovy, man. And, we got the man, and it's groovy, man. Groovy, man. Groovy. And it's just...
He must have started early. You think? He must have.
You're under the assumption that he stops.
Well, yeah.
At that
And
point,
the funny thing is,
many people didn't.
years later, he still talked like that.
Yeah, oh
It's
yeah.
like- but yeah, the funny thing is, and I remember Richie Havens talking about this. He said, "I ran out of things to do." he said I started mixing things in.
Yeah.
He said I was playing, and all of a sudden I started throwing in Motherless Child.
Right. He started pulling from what's kind of known as the folk storehouse
Mm,
of just a lot of verses that you find in a whole lot of different songs.
mm,
And he just started letting things come to him.
right.
And he just started singing.
Well, he started doing Freedom,
Hmm.
and then he started doing Motherless Child, and he kept going into all of these things. He went until he didn't have anything else, and he did 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But on screen, it's remarkable because, like I say, you feel like you're up there with him,
Hmm.
and it's that intimate. It's that intimacy that is so wonderful about this
Hmm.
film because you're not sitting in the 63rd row,
No, you're up on stage a
right?
lot of times.
Right. Um, and what's funny is you see this crowd, you see all of these people, a lot of them naked,
Hmm.
and they're all out there and doing what they're doing. They're tripping, some of them, and they're having a wonderful time.
Hmm.
And the other side of it is that the promoters are sweating bullets because they tore the fences down.
Yeah, they tore the fences down and actually made an announcement that said, "This is now a free concert from here on out." How mad would you be if you paid for your ticket, you showed up early, you're up in the front,
I was just about to say that.
and 6 hours into the festival, oh, they tore the fences down, man. It's a free concert now. Son of a bitch!
That's the free. That's
That's
the that's the phrase. That's the phrase you remember from this.
yeah.
Is it's a free concert now? Because they paid for their tickets, but they started tearing the fences down and they started coming in because the crowd showed up early
Mm-hmm.
and they started coming in and it's like it's a free concert, and you're a promoter and you put your money into this and you just see. You just see the numbers ticking away. It's like, oh crap.
Even at one point in the movie, the one guy was like, "Oh yeah, this is a huge success," and the person interviewing him was like, "Yeah, but what about the investors?" He goes, "Oh, the people that put money into this took a huge bath, but I think this is a huge big success."
He's not wrong.
He's not.
He's not wrong. But the promoters are thinking we've got people to answer to.
Hmm.
We've got investors, we've got all these people, and it's just you're sitting there with knots in your stomach saying, I'm glad everybody's having a wonderful time, but come Monday morning, I've got to sit in somebody's office and I've got to answer for this. But again, like I say, it's one of those things where everything could have gone wrong and didn't because on the second day it started raining and raining and raining and raining and raining, and there's all this electrical equipment.
And there's these massive towers that are
Right.
lightning rods because it's in the middle of a farm. It's in the
John
middle of a
John
field.
Rosenman said, I put this thing together for a nice business venture, and now I'm worried about I'm going to kill 500,000 people on this single day." Well,
Be
anyway,
famous either way.
yeah, he was famous either way. I'm not going to go down in history as the man who killed 500,000 people. But I mean,
Well,
500,000 people. That's a lot of hippies.
that's a lot of people. That I can only imagine the funk around that place.
Yeah, I was thinking that. It's like, I can imagine the smell in that place was
Yeah.
amazing.
I mean, although I do like that they took time out to actually show people bathing.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
not because you got to see everybody naked, but because it was like, yeah, they were actually washing. The hippies are not the great unwashed. They took care of themselves.
Some of them. Yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, some. Others thought that living off of the earth meant smelling like it too.
And smelling like it too. But what's interesting is, at the time, and like I said about Wallkill, it's like people have these fantasies about hippies. They're just uncontained and they smell bad and they're just gonna drug your children and just the demon spawn.
I love that they demonize them, but they're really just. I mean, the people in the town that go to the bar until all hours are more dangerous. I saw a quote that
The
was
the guy sitting on his porch with a gun in his
yeah,
hand.
yeah. Like I saw a great quote that said, "People who are high think but don't move, but people who are drinking move without thinking."
Right, right.
Because the blackout drug, like you're on pot, you're just sitting there. You're just
Yeah.
you're not going too many places.
What's more dangerous, a hippie a hippie who's tripping on acid, or a farm owner who's sitting on his front porch with a shotgun in his hand, daring anybody to step on his land? I mean, it's,
While off camera, probably drinking from a jug with 3 X's on it.
right, right, and that's it's logic because the hippie's probably not going to hurt you.
If you're gonna have an infestation of a lot of people, it's better that it's hippies.
Right, right. But what is interesting, and I found this out when I was watching. I was no, this when I was watching the movie. The two best acts in this thing are the first one
And
and the last one. Because on Monday morning, can you imagine
Oh,
waking up to Jimi Hendrix playing the national anthem? What a moment!
yeah.
And a year before his death,
hmm
and it's an electrifying performance. It really is, and I don't, no pun intended. It is really electrifying. To see him to just see him do that, and that's the end of the concert,
Right, and that stuff actually rivals his performance at Monterey Pop.
which is another thing I was really surprised by. This is not on Criterion.
No.
Monterey Pop is,
Yes.
and I assumed that the reason that this was not on Criterion was because, and by the way, putting this on video or putting this on television has got to be a licensing nightmare
Oh yeah.
because of all the acts and all the songs and everything you've got to get together, which I think is the reason it's probably not on Criterion.
It's probably rights. The company that owns it probably doesn't want to lose any residual money from any sales.
Mm.
Also, Monterey Pop was a D.A. Pennebaker picture, and they had a good partnership with him. So it
Which
could
just
have
passed
been-
away.
Yeah, he did. So that could have been part of a deal that they had with him, much like a deal that I assume exists with Wes Anderson, because all of his movies get released onto Criterion.
Yeah.
Eventually, regardless of what studio put them out. So I think he has a personal deal that they have to abide by when he's making a movie for a studio.
I don't know what the deal is to put things on Criterion, but I have all due respect to the people at Criterion, but some of those choices I'm a little suspect about. I'm not 100% sure why Armageddon is on Criterion.
So here's the thing. Criterion does not claim to have the best movies. Criterion says that it is a collection of important and classic films.
Hmm.
One could argue, it would be a difficult argument, but one could argue that something like Armageddon and The Rock are there because they are singular examples of the overblown 90s action movie, and therefore, for historical purposes, should be represented. The other
But
thing
by
is
that
that,
logic, Independence Day should be there.
yep. Hey,
You know what I'm saying?
they've got the Breakfast Club. I mean,
Yeah, but the Breakfast Club was an important film. I mean, whether you like it or not, was an important film for that decade.
hey, so is Independence Day.
But the Breakfast Club was actually really about something.
I hate that
Independence Day
movie.
wasn't.
I hate the Breakfast Club. Anyway,
Well, I mean, I was a teenager when it came out, and you know,
it was made specifically for you and your generation. I
it
didn't
was
see it
John
until I
Hughes,
was in
and
my
John
20s.
Hughes was the only person that, the adult who really got us
Hmm.
as a filmmaker. And
Yeah.
but essentially, I'm suspect about that, and I've always been curious about why Woodstock hasn't been on Criterion.
Well, it's Warner Brothers, right?
Right.
I th- there's a possibility because I think Warner Media has something to do with the streaming ability of the Criterion Collection.
Mm.
Um, and they do have Warner titles,
Yeah.
so maybe it eventually will. Maybe they just have to clear the rights, or they're waiting for another time that wouldn't be the 50th anniversary, so that Warner's can still make a lot of their money.
Well, I'm also surprised that Warner's didn't do something with 50th anniversary,
Yeah, that is weird.
because I don't understand that. I don't get that. But I don't get studio decisions anyway. A lot of them. Because this was an Oscar winner. This was an unusual Oscar winner because
Hmm.
you have to understand the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences was, and always will be primarily run and voted on by people who are older,
Yeah,
an older generation. So for them to choose this film is really remarkable.
and I think that it's kind of a testimony to how good the film is.
Hmm.
And a lot of that has to do with the editing that we were talking about earlier. That split screen design and using that mega wide screen
Oh yeah,
and
the filmmaking techniques, yeah,
cutting that in. The editing is a huge star of
yeah.
this movie, and I think you just end up appreciating that. And this was the documentary wing, which has different rules and different mindsets of people sometimes.
But the documentary wing is usually and traditionally has been run by mostly retired people
Hmm.
or volunteers, and again, older people. And for them to choose a long documentary like this was kind of unusual, and also to pick a movie um, like Hearts and Minds,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a few years later,
74, yeah.
because the thing about that category is they traditionally have always picked something they're comfortable with.
It's either crowd pleasers or Holocaust films.
D-Day.
Typically, yeah, D-Day.
You want World War II documentaries.
Anything that's Holocaust related or makes you feel good, like Searching for Sugar Man or 20 Feet from Stardom. Great movies,
Mm.
but they're crowd pleasy and not necessarily the best documentaries of those years.
If you have a beautifully made documentary about two boys trying to realize their dream of playing professional basketball, forget it.
Yeah, that's also 3 or 4 hours long.
Yeah, 5 years of hard journalism. Screw you.
Yeah, yeah,
What do
yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, exactly.
But I've always been suspect of that anyway, because it goes back and forth.
Hmm.
Because um, Spike Lee was not. Remember the year Spike Lee was nominated for Four Little Girls, and they gave it to a Holocaust documentary.
Yeah.
But I've seen that Holocaust documentary.
That was the Showa one that Spielberg had something to do with, wasn't it?
I don't think that was no, that was something else. This was The Long Way Home.
Hmm.
This was the one about the 3 years after the Holocaust,
Oh, okay.
from the Holocaust, from the liberation to the founding of Israel. But I'm always suspect of that, and it goes back and forth. Sometimes they make good decisions. Sometimes their decisions are like, what the hell?
Right.
What are you doing?
Like not choosing the act of killing,
Mhm.
but choosing 20 Feet from Stardom over it. 20 Feet from Stardom is a good movie.
It's a good movie.
It's a very good documentary. I don't want to take anything away from it, but The Act of Killing is one of the best movies of the decade. So,
I love good documentaries.
hmm
I love a documentary, and Woodstock is a good example of this, where you're watching something and you can sense that this filmmaker wants to do something new and different and unusual and has put a lot of hard work into it.
oh yeah,
The best documentary of this decade, OJ Made in America, is an example of that. Because by the time it's over, you feel like you have experienced an era,
yeah,
and not just because it's long, but because it's such a work of hard journalism,
hmm
and someone really thought this out. They didn't just point a camera at something, or take a bunch of historical footage, go in an editing suite, and just knit it all
right,
together,
right,
and put Gregory Peck behind the microphone, you know, or Hal Holbrook to tell you about the kamikaze pilots. Which I like historical documentaries, but I like something that reaches, which is why Errol Morris is one of my favorite filmmakers.
he is so good.
I'm about to go to a film festival this weekend, and they're featuring American Dharma,
Hmm.
which is about the man who helped Donald Trump get into the White House.
Hmm.
And I'm really, really looking forward to that.
Well, Errol Morris is whatever, I don't remember what he called it, but he invented this device that helps people to be able to look at the camera without having to look like off to the side.
Hmm.
Like, so he invented something so that they can look at the interviewer but still be looking at the camera instead of having to be looking away from the person who's talking to them.
It feels like they're talking to you.
Yeah.
And he broke the cardinal rule of documentaries: no recreations.
Right, he staged recreations for The Thin Blue Line, which stands as one of the best documentaries ever made.
It does. It does. I have been trying to figure out how to talk about that movie on this show.
I've seen
It's
it. I've seen it once, and it was a long time ago, so I'd have to revisit it. It's an
it's
intense
really
picture.
it's an intense picture. It really is, especially when you know the history that followed it, because it helped free a man who was
Right.
wrongly accused.
And it's kind of like it's kind of Rashomon style, which is
Mhm.
odd for a documentary. It doesn't take a position early. It argues that it doesn't take a position at all, but that's not really true.
One of the things I love about his work is often it is not. Um, it doesn't make its point in the first scene and then carry it through to the end. You have to work to figure out what the movie is about.
Right.
I will never forget. Um, there was a documentary that I saw completely cold. I knew nothing about it, and I saw it in the late '90s. It was called Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control.
That doc is so much fun. It's ridiculous.
It's about four individuals. One who works with naked mole rats.
Yep.
One is a lion tamer. The other does the um, works with little robots.
And the other
And
one's
another
a topographical
topiary animals. Yeah.
topiary animals. Yeah.
And you're wondering what in the world do these people have in common? And you sit there and you think, wait a minute. Every one of these people is trying to control nature.
Mm-hmm.
And it is always out of their hands.
Right.
Because nature abhors a vacuum. And no matter, and I love Clyde Beatty, the lion tamer, sitting there. And he says, "You have an understanding with that lion when you go in the cage. Yes, you have a chair, and yes, you have a whip, but he can tear you to ribbons if he wants to."
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't matter what you have.
Right. And just to have that kind of idea is so cleverly put together because you don't really know going in because even when it's over, you're not sure how these people are connected. You just have to put it together for yourself.
Right, right. And then, I mean, his stuff. We definitely need to figure out a way to talk about Errol Morris because you've got Gates of Heaven about this pet cemetery.
Vernon,
It's
Florida,
a
which
good
is
pet cemetery movie. Yeah, Vernon, Florida, which I actually saw in a film class when I was a freshman, I think.
that's a hilarious movie.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
That Donald Rumsfeld movie he made,
I still need to see that because.
that is creepy as all get out because it is the man is he's a human shell game.
Oh yeah.
He's a human game of 3-card Monty. You know, find the lady, find the lady, find the lady.
Right.
It's just like,
I mean, he's got A Brief History of Time, Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control. Have you seen Mr. Death? The
Mr.
Rise and
Death is
Fall
one
of
of my
Fred A.
favorite movies
Luker
of all time.
Jr.? Yeah, that movie is.
Mr. Death is one of.
I
Yeah.
went on a big Morris kick a few years ago, several years ago.
I did too.
And Fog of War I got to see in the theater. The Robert
I did
McNamara
too.
one.
I did too. The one about Bob McNamara. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's still a few that I haven't seen. Standard Operating Procedure, Tabloid, Known Unknown. But I did see the B-side. That was
That was good.
That
was
was
good. It's about a woman who's an artist, still using film,
Mm-hmm.
and where everything's gone digital.
Right.
But the funny thing is, it starts with that idea, and then it spools into something else.
Very much. That's kind of what he does.
That's what Mr. Death was.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I'm also interested to see. He has a Netflix series called Wormwood
Mm.
that I have purposefully not learned anything about other than the fact that he directed it. So I don't know anything about it. But I think it's a documentary series on Netflix. But anyway, Woodstock.
Moving back to Woodstock, is Michael Wadley known for anything else?
I don't believe so.
He didn't make that many films. He directed. The only other thing I really know about him is he directed this ridiculous werewolf movie in the early '80s called Wolfen
Oh, jeez.
with Albert Finney. That is literally the only other film I know of him from. I wish that he made more documentaries. His filmography is very, very short.
Yeah.
Tragically.
It's Woodstock, Wolfen, Woodstock, The Lost Performances, and Jimi Hendrix Live at Woodstock. So it's stuff that he'd already shot
Right.
mostly.
So
but
I'm thinking
he's
most
still
of
alive, though.
Yeah, he's still living. I'm thinking that most of I get the feeling that most of Woodstock has to do with Martin Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And one thing I love is about this film, especially, is that the filmmakers generally stay off the stage.
Mm-hmm.
I like that approach. We don't
Yeah.
need a narrator. We don't
No.
need somebody, behind the camera.
Right.
And there are no interviews. It's not a talking head movie.
There's no talking heads. They interview on the scene.
Right.
He was more of a cinematographer, I'm finding. He shot Scorsese's first picture, which would probably explain how he got Scorsese to edit his picture.
Was it Who's That Knocking on My Door?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He shot David Holtzman's Diary,
Mhm.
which is a really weird mockumentary from '67, the first of the fake documentaries, I think.
Yeah.
Charlie Mingus picture.
There's a Mingus Among Us.
Janice from '74. Like he did more. I mean, that's only 9 as opposed to the 3 or 4 things he directed. So
Yeah.
he didn't stick around long. I think 74 is his last credit.
Mm, yeah. Well, as far as the concert goes, we've said a couple of times that this is one of those things where everything that could have gone wrong didn't. And the proof of that is when they tried to put it on again. They've done it
Yeah.
twice.
They did one in 93 and one in 99.
Yeah.
And they tried to do a 50th and it never formalized.
Yeah, it never came together.
Yeah.
The one in 94, I don't know much about that one. The one in 99 was a disaster.
Oh, of epic proportions. The 93-94 one actually was reasonably successful.
Mm.
Um, I think that one was successful because they put it on not as a hey, remember Woodstock happened, more of a let's give this next generation, the generation after, its own Woodstock. So it
Right.
got the popular musical acts of the time and made it an event for the youth.
Right.
Whereas the 30th and what was going to be the 50th were trading on the nostalgia of the original event instead of the spirit of the event, which was bringing the youth culture together in one place.
The times were not with it.
No. The
thing
times
about-
they had changed.
They had it changed. The thing about it is that they didn't observe why the original was so successful,
Right.
because everybody was in this particular mindset,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody got together, and it was essentially, to a lot of people, a protest.
Mm-hmm.
It was the largest singular protest in our country's history,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a very peaceful protest.
Right.
Now, I'm sure there wasn't a lot of peace in the offices of the banks then on Monday morning
Yeah.
for the poor investors, but historically, in the long run, this became a finality to the 1960s that was very, very positive.
Mm-hmm.
It could have ended in disaster, and it didn't. But it also, I should note, followed a decade that included Charles Manson, Vietnam,
Yeah.
3 Mile Island,
Mm-hmm.
the hostage crisis, the me decade, all of that stuff, and disco.
Mm.
Um, so this was a moment in history. Little island containing 500,000 people.
Yeah.
Put together with some of the greatest music of the 20th century, some of the
Oh.
greatest musicians of the 20th century.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Without a doubt.
Like I said, not gathering together small-time talent.
Right.
These were, you look at the list of people that were on this, it is amazing. It's everybody you've heard of.
And many people that you haven't that were very popular at the time, but didn't really have a lot of staying power, like 10 years after, or Canned Heat. That
Can I quit question why Shauna Na was there?
you can question it.
I never figured that out. I always think of Shauna Na as being like this nostalgia for the 50s. I never think of it being like this.
Well, just remember that a lot of that early, like Motown and stuff like that they were doing was really popular in the early '60s and were kind of front runners to the rock and roll of the
That's
'60s.
true.
So probably they were there because they could be, A, which is
They said
probably
yes.
a huge reason. Yeah, they said yes.
What's the old joke? It was Sunday and they were home.
Right, exactly.
And they were home when they called.
But it's really my question more is why the hell is Joan Baez there?
I understand that a lot more than I do Shauna Na.
I mean, I get it because she was the celebrity presence at a lot of these protests and sit-ins and stuff. She was a very big organizer, protest leader, but her music is very outside the frame of
It
what
is.
they were playing. Like she's out there singing I dreamed I met Joe Hill tonight, which is an old organizing song,
Hmm.
um, to a group of people who don't know who Joe Hill was.
Right.
Was an early union organizer, to a crowd who is wondering when the rest of the band is going to start playing with her. And
Couldn't have
so,
been any weirder if you had Grandpa Jones singing "I Ain't No Communist."
listen,
You know?
yeah, I mean, I mean, it's just it was always crazy to me. It's like I'm looking at these, and a lot of the people that are there grew out of the folk movement and became like, folk rock and the rock that became what it was.
A lot of them
You know.
died
Well, yeah,
soon after. Two
yeah.
of them at least, because within a year,
Janice was gone in a year or two after this.
and so was Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, both heroin.
Yeah, those
Or
damn drugs.
was Janis Joplin alcohol? She drank herself to death. It was Jimi Hendrix that did heroin.
I thought it was drugs.
Janis. It could have been any number of things.
Yeah.
she 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 wasn't big on the control aspect of.
But this whole thing was, I mean, the straight culture, the older generation, just really, the hippies were just, you know, just a complete mystery.
Yeah.
It's like, why do they dress like that? Why do they talk like that? Two of the attendees, this is just a side note, two of the attendees at that concert were Walter Cronkite's daughters, who had said to their father, we're going to go upstate to a concert. And he said, well, me and mother were thinking symphony when they said concert. And he said, we were sitting there watching television. And he said, on the weekend, and we start hearing about this giant hippie concert. And he said it was like a movie out of the 30s. We both jumped up and looked at each other and we went, concert! Suddenly realizing where their daughters were. You know? But I'm imagining that was a lot of parents.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's about all I got to say.
I think that wraps it up here for us. What do we have coming up?
Next week, or next time, or on our next episode. Again, are we going in the future? Are we in the present? I'm freaking out here. This is 2019, right?
When will then be now?
Soon. See, we're at now. But I mean, it's Blade Runner, okay? Which was made in 1982, right? And takes place in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
But looks like somebody's idea of the future for 1989.
Right.
So it's a little, it's messing with my head.
It's like all those 50s or 30s movies, like Times to Come, I think it was, or
Things to Come.
Things to Come, that just had a very odd vision of what I believe was around the year 2000.
In this futuristic world of 1980.
Yeah. I always love that. Yeah.
Like Escape from New York. You want to believe it's the future, but it's 1997.
Right.
But that's the problem with any new movie in the future. Time will catch up with it.
Right. Unless you set it like Star Trek, like hundreds of years in the future,
but still,
where it's not gonna matter because everybody who is watching it will be dead and they can't go, well, I was waiting for this to happen, but it didn't do it.
But still.
Yeah.
Eventually, time will catch up with it. It will be the 23rd century.
Unless you just don't say when your thing is taking place.
That's true. Like Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
You know, But Blade Runner, it's our world in 2019, which is now. But
Yeah.
2000, the sequel I can actually deal with because that's still to come. That's still about 20 years in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So 28 years or something.
30 years.
But anyway, next week we're going to talk about Blade Runner and its sequel. Which
Well, our episode coming up in the immediate future is the Royal Tenenbaums.
Yes, we have the Royal Tenenbaums, and then we have Blade Runner.
Blade Runner, which is just the trippiest of trippy.
I actually 2047 is really the reason I want to talk about this anyway.
2049 was. I actually just got this for my birthday this year. I saw it in the theater, but I was happily surprised by getting the Blu-ray.
It's a really, really good movie.
Yeah, one of my favorite contemporary directors, Denis Villeneuve.
Mm-hmm.
Although I confess to not having seen a lot of his work, but Arrival was my favorite picture of.
I'm going to confess to being a little bit cold to Ridley Scott.
He's not on my list of greats either.
Right.
I mean, I love Alien.
I do too.
Blade Runner fascinates the crap out of me. Whether I love it or not is a whole different thing.
I'll let you know because I haven't seen it in a while. I'm going to watch it. I honestly, there is literally a point in that movie where I start to get tired and a little bored.
I guess I can see that. I don't know what it was about it, and we'll get into it when we start talking about it. But it fascinates me because it's like a puzzle that I'm trying to figure out. That I think I'm like 3 pieces away,
Mm-hmm.
but they're like stuck in the box, and I don't see them. You know,
Right.
And I just kind of obsess over it at that point. But I'm looking forward to that. Then we go from the present future all the way to the distant past for Akira Kurosawa's Kagemusha, the Shadow Warrior.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, we have a lot of good stuff coming up. But that about does it for us here on the Pod Bay Doors. You can find us, all of our back episodes, at the Pod Bay Doors podcast.wordpress.com. You can find us on iTunes and on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter and throw a tip into our virtual tip jar with the handle @pod_bay over at Patreon. We would greatly appreciate anything. Give us your likes, your upvotes, your shares, your everything. Tell your friends. We very much appreciate you listening, and the Pod Bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.
Unfortunately, yes! Skippy, what's the name of that group playing on stage?
Who?
The name of the group.
Who?
The group on stage.
Who?
The group playing on stage.
Who?
You're starting to sound like an owl, Skippy.
Who is on stage?
That's what I'm asking you. Who is on stage?
That's what I said.
You said who?
I sure did.
So tell me the name.
Who?
The name of the group.
Who?
The group on stage.
Who?
The name of the band on stage.
Who?
You're doing that owl thing again, Skippy.
I am not Aunt Slappy. I'm telling you who's on stage.
So tell me.
Who?
The name of the group.
Who?
The group on stage.
Who?
That's what I'm asking you.
And I'm telling you the answer.
Wait, Skippy. Let's start over. Is there a band on stage?
Yes.
Does that band have a name?
Yes.
Do you know the name of that band?
Yes.
Then tell me the name of the band on stage.
Who?
The name of the band.
Who?
The band on stage.
Who?
The band playing on stage.
Who?
That's what I want to know.
I'm telling you.
Who is on stage?
Yes.
Who is?
Yes.
Oh, so the name of the band is Yes.
No, Aunt Slappy. Yes is not even at this concert.
Then who is on stage?
Yes.
Who is?
Yes.
That's what I just said. Yes is on stage.
No, Yes is not here. Who is on stage?
What are you asking me for?
I'm not.
Wait, let's try this again. Do you see the band on stage?
No, I don't see the band. That's a different group entirely.
On stage, Skippy. Look, see the band?
No, I don't.
Get rid of those John Lennon glasses and look. There's the band.
No, that's not the band. The band is performing later on. Who's Who's on stage?
You tell me.
Who?
The name of the group on stage.
Who?
The name of the group.
Who?
The group on stage.
Who?
The band.
No, the band is performing later. Right now we're listening to who?
That's what I want to know.
Hey, you squirrels are funny, man. Come on up here and take a bow.
Little brother. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Now everybody go home, including you guys. What's your name?
Who?
The name of your band.
Who?
Don't start with me. Just get off the stage. And the rest of you, go! Why aren't they leaving?
They dig you, Aunt Slappy Man.
Oh, yeah? We'll see about that. I said leave!
Oh, very groovy, isn't it, mates? Totally. We are the Who!
Yeesh, these kids would applaud my laundry. Why won't they take a hike?
They want more music.
All right, then. They can have more music.